Well, Hebrews 11 sometimes stands alone as such a classic text that we sometimes remove it from the rest of the book of Hebrews. And so it's important for us to understand the flow of how Hebrews 11 actually fits. And to understand the author's concern here, he is concerned, if we want to look just a verse up, in Hebrews 10, verse 39. I want to read that verse and verse 1 of chapter 11, and I want you to pretend that that big 11 is not there. Just pretend, because when the author wrote it, he didn't write 11. That came much, much, much later. And so his flow of thought is from 39 to 1. So let's read that part again. And it says this, "But we do not belong to those who shrink back and are destroyed, but to those who have faith and are saved." Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. So when you put that together, you see that the concern of the writer is don't shrink back. Don't shrink back. If you do shrink back, then the stakes are really high. You can be destroyed, or as he says, you'll fall into the hands of the living God, and that's a dreadful thing. Right? So don't shrink back, but live by faith, which is where he launches into chapter 11. And so having this perspective is going to keep us from shrinking back and being destroyed. Having faith. What kind of faith? Well, that's what the author is trying to unpack for us. And he says that in the opening statement, and we saw this last time. So review last week's sermon, and you'll understand the definition of faith that he lays out here. But quite simply, it's this. It's that we don't shrink back, but we see the unseen. Remember? We see the unseen things in reality. So we go through reality. We see the pews. We see each other. We see God. We see food. We see the blood that he shed for us that washes us of our sins. We see the sky, the trees. We see Jesus, our high priest. It's all part of reality, and that's the reality we are to live in. That's faith. Faith sees the unseen within the reality that we're living in. And so how we do that will cause us to move forward into receiving the great salvation that God has for us. So understanding this about faith means that faith is a continual thing. It is a constant response to God's revelation. When God speaks, I respond in obedience. That's faith. And it's not just when you're saved. It's not just when you receive Christ. Not just when you're converted, when you become a Christian. That's not the only time. That's the start of a life of constant responding to God's word by faith. And that's the kind of faith that allows us to see the unseen now in every part of our life. The more we respond with obedience to what God says, the more we see the unseen as part of our reality. So that's the practice of faith. The more we practice that faith of obedience, the more we'll see the unseen as part of our reality today. So the author, to get them to understand this kind of faith, he has them look back first at their own history. And he says, remember when you lived this way? What did you do? You let your property be taken by the authorities and by the Romans. And when they took it, you rejoiced. You rejoiced. Well, that's strange. And when your brothers and sisters would be imprisoned and go to jail, you didn't hide away. You actually went and visited them at the risk of being identified as part of them and being imprisoned yourself. You did it anyway. You take great risks of love. That's what faith looks like. Faith works itself out in love. And that's the kind of faith that they had. So he has them remember that. Remember that? I remember that. Do you remember that? Because if they remember that, they'll remember, oh, we did live that way. Which means we can live that way now. We can go back. We once had it. We can get it again. And so he has them remember their own story, and then he has them remember their ancestors of faith. Remember, they're primarily Jewish Christians, so they have a very deep heritage and remembrance of Jewish faith, and that goes all the way back to the beginning. And so that's where we get this big hall of faith. Now, an actor from the show The Chosen, she plays Mary of Bethany, and she asked her mentor, how do you think I should play this character? And her mentor said something that was very helpful to her, and I think helpful to us. She said, you're not just playing a character, you're playing your ancestor. You're not just playing a character, you're playing an ancestor of faith. And so when you put it that way, you start understanding, oh, I am carrying something forward that my ancestors had lived out. Now, sometimes you see your parents, they say, hey, you should live this way, and you should do this, and you should do that, and they expect you to obey, right? And children have issues with obedience often, especially with their elders. They don't always want to obey. They resist the obedience. But here's one thing that children don't fail to do. They don't fail to imitate. They don't fail to follow the example of those who are elders. So they might resist elders when they say to do something, but they can't resist imitating them. And that's the importance of seeing these people as our ancestors. Ancestors, yeah, they can tell us things, but what the writer of Hebrews is saying is, look what they modeled for us, and let's imitate that. Let's imitate that kind of faith. And so what we learned from these three people that the writer mentions, there's Noah, there's Abraham, there's Sarah. What we learned from them is faith obeys without certainty about the future. Faith obeys without certainty of the future. God spoke to each one of them, to Noah, to Abraham, and to Sarah. And each one of them responded in obedience. But each one of them didn't know how God was going to fulfill his promise to them. That was still in the air. That was still uncertain. And you could see them struggle with that often. But that is the lesson that we are to get. That faith obeys without certainty about the future. That is an amazing kind of faith. Now, the writer of Hebrews is saying that's the faith that's going to keep you from shrinking back. That's the kind of faith that's going to keep you from getting destroyed. That's the kind of faith that's going to actually land you in salvation. That kind of faith. Not just a singular moment of faith, not just an event, but a continuous acting response of obedience to God, even when you don't know how the promise is going to be fulfilled. Well, that's the question, isn't it? How? How? So, first, Noah. Faith obeys without certainty about the future. How? When you revere God. If you want to have the kind of faith that obeys God without knowing how the outcome's going to flesh out, how is God going to fulfill this promise? You need to, one, revere God. That's what Noah exemplified. Verse 7, by faith Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. Holy fear. So Noah's faith, he gets a word from God. It's a warning. It's a warning that he's going to flood the earth. He's starting over. Whole new baptism of water that's going to happen throughout the world. And he tells them, build an ark. And so, with holy fear, Noah built an ark to the exact specifications that God gave to him. With holy fear, Noah built the ark, convinced that what God said about the flood was going to happen. With holy fear, Noah built the ark knowing that when God speaks, it's as good as done. That's what holy fear does. With holy fear, Noah staved off all the mocking of all of his neighbors who walked by saying, "What are you doing building an ark in the middle of nowhere?" Holy fear. With holy fear, Noah built that ark, and that ark, once he built it, would be a symbol to everyone else around of God's impending judgment. God was going to judge the earth. That ark symbolized that. And with holy fear, Noah built that ark. And so the world might say to him, Noah, that ark symbolizing God's judgment on us, you're not a good person. You're not a good person because you're too exclusive in your beliefs to think that we're going to get judged by God. Who are you to tell us that we're going to be judged by God? You need to accept a plurality of views. You need to be more tolerant, Noah, because, all religions are all basically saying the same thing, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's pretty much across the board, a lot of that. So be like us. Be like us. Be tolerant, be accepting, be a good person, Noah. Well, what we see at the end of verse 7, by his faith he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that is in keeping with faith. You see, the world's perspective of just tolerate all views, just all religions lead to the same place. That is the wrong reference point because it's comparing us to them, to them, to them, to them. It's using the wrong reference point. The reference point is not other human beings. The reference point is God. God. It's what he says about a good person. That's what matters. And for Noah, God knew that Noah was a man of faith, and he credited that to him as righteousness. And that's why he says it became an heir of righteousness in keeping with faith. That is Noah saying, hey, you might say I'm not a good person, but you're the wrong reference point. God says I'm a good person. God says I'm a good person, not because of me, but because of him. I trust him. And when he sees my trust, he sees, righteousness. That's what matters. So when you fear God, the reference point is not people, what they think, what they say. It's not the cultural script, right? The city has a script for you to follow. And you say, that script, that's not from God. I'm going to keep God's script. I'm going to follow him. I'm going to build an ark. Even though you say I'm crazy, even though you say I'm not a good person. Because what matters to me is what God says. In holy fear you obey, even when everybody else might say you're nuts. Everybody else might call you down and say you're a bad person for being intolerant. No, you revere God and you obey. And what does that look like? It looks like, taking some crazy risks. When you revere God and he tells you to do something, you'll do some crazy stuff like Noah. Crazy stuff like building an ark in the middle of nowhere, right? What are some risks of faith that you've been taking? What kind of risks of love have you been making on your neighborhood? Going out to talk to that neighbor who seems a little complicated or a little messy. What kind of risks of faith? What job scenario have you accepted or considering, even though it gives you less money, but it really makes a kingdom impact? What kind of risks of faith are you taking because you have a holy fear of God? All right? So that's the first thing. If you want to be able to obey without knowing how is the promise going to be fulfilled, what's it going to look like, you need to revere God. That's what we learn from Noah. Secondly, we move on to Abraham. Faith obeys without certainty about the future when you build on the eternal. So first you revere God. Second, you build on the eternal. Verse 8, by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went even though he did not know where he was going. So there it is again, right? Faith obeys even though you don't know where you're going, right? What did God do? God came to Abram at the time in Genesis 12, and he said, Abram, leave your country, leave your people, leave your father's household, leave your comfortable lifestyle, and go. And Abraham's thinking, okay, where? And God says, I'll let you know. Huh, really? Just get out. That's it. And he did. Abram left. Wow. How did you do that? Well, it says he lived like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. Verse 10. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And there it is. There's Abram. He's living like a stranger, living in tents. Tents? Tents, that doesn't sound like the pursuit of happiness. That doesn't sound like, the marketing brochure in your retirement community, right? It doesn't have tents on it. It's got pools. It's got, gated communities. It's got great landscaping. Tents. Tents? Well, Abraham was looking for something. He left Ur not to just find some other Ur. He left Ur of the Chaldees not just to find some other nice place to live. He went because he wanted a place that God created, that God designed, that God promised. That's the quality of city that he was looking for. See, the foundations, when they're built by God, they don't shake. The foundations of a city that is founded upon God and His Word and His promises are not going to crumble. If you look at the world that we live in today, the city that we live in, the Millennial Tower over there, remember that? The thing that's sinking or leaning over, right? I think Joe Montana had a condo in there and sold it because he didn't want to live in a building that was falling down. It's such a symbol of a city that is not built on God, a city whose foundations are shaken. This city has a great history of earthquakes. And as we've seen in this city has gone burned up in fires repeatedly when in the 1800s. They came out here, they built wooden houses and wooden buildings, and they all burned, and the whole city got wiped out. About 7 times before 1900, right? City shakes, city burns, goes down, they rebuild, start over, do it again and again, at 7 times. Before the 1906 earthquake, which was the big one, right? Why did people come to this city? Looking for gold, right? There's gold in them, their hills. And so they came from everywhere. All over the world they came. And why? Because they wanted a quick buck, money, greed. That's what brought people here. And you build a life on that, it's going to crumble. It will be shaken. People still come to this city looking for a quick buck. How can I find the right startup? How do I get into high tech? How do I do this and that so that I can get into this city, make the big money, and get the nice house and the dream house and all of that? And you find that even when they get all of that, it's shaky. It's not enough to carry your life. It's not enough to hold your dreams. It's not enough to hold your satisfaction and joy. It's not enough. Even when you get it, it's not enough. And that's what Abraham knew. Abraham had all that, and he left all of that because he knew the foundations of that are shaky. I want a city that is built on foundations that will not shake. And what is that? It is a building made by God. So even if I don't have my dream house in this world, I already have my dream house in the next. It's coming for me. So if you already have it, I can live in tents. I can live here. Because if God brings me to a place, it's because he's doing something. He's working. And he wants me to be part of that. That was the whole story last night at Alpha. We're here in the city, and God is working. And he's working in the lives of women who are facing unplanned pregnancies. And guess what? He's called us to be here. And we've called us to be here, not to make a lot of money. None of the people at Alpha make a lot of money. I can tell you that. I used to work on the board. They don't make a lot of money. And the people who serve and volunteer, they too, they don't make a lot of money. No one's making a lot of money. So why are they here? Because God is at work. And we get to be part of what God is doing in the city. Even if it means we live in tents. We live in tents. Because why? We're strangers. We're aliens. This isn't our home. We have our dream home, but it's not here. It's there. And it's coming. And that dream home is going to be built by God, not going to shake. It's going to be beautiful. Right? So how do we live? 1 Peter 2, 11 and 12. Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles, strangers, aliens, to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. You know, those desires for, I just need more money. I need a bigger thing. I need a bigger house. I need a bigger, whatever. That thing, abstain from that. That will war against your soul. But, verse 12, live such good lives among the pagans so that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. That's why. When you know that your foundation is built on God and the things that you do, that the work you do is eternal, it has eternal value, then you live your life. You live that good life in such a way that people can see it. And then when God comes and brings that house and brings that city that has foundations that won't shake, they will be ready for it too. The watching world around us, the cynical, skeptical world that watches us live out this life of faith and incarnates the love of God, they will be ready for it too. So what do? We live good lives. We love our neighbors. We do it. We don't look for our dream house. We just love because our dream house is coming later. That's essential. If we're going to have the kind of faith that obeys without the certainty of the outcome of how it's going to look like, then we need to have that kind of perspective, building on eternal things, right? So first, that kind of faith reveres God. Second, we build on eternal things. And then third, the faith that obeys without certainty about the future trusts God to be faithful. Trusts God to be faithful. Verse 11, by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. That is amazing. She considered him faithful who made it the promise. Sometimes we think faith, what we got to do to faith is we got to pump our faith up. We got to pump ourselves up and say, I just need more faith. I need to believe more. I need to ask for bigger things. I need to have less doubt. I need to have more belief. And what is that? That's just putting more faith in faith. That's not faith. What is faith? Faith is always in an object. Faith has an object. Requires something to put your faith in. And so if you want faith, what do? You looked at the object of your faith and you say, oh God, here's the prayer. God, I want to see more and more how utterly faithful and reliable you are. That's what I want. So the bigger he gets, the stronger my faith gets, right? It's not, I need to believe more, believe more, believe. That's just faith in faith. But faith in God says, God, I want you to be big. I want to see just how faithful you are. And that's the kind of faith that Sarah had. Sarah knew if she looked at herself, whoa, I'm in my 90s, I'm getting old. I don't even know if I can take care of a child anymore, right? And I've got this husband who's even older than I am, right? Okay, I'll try to believe more, right? That's not what Sarah did. Sarah shifted her eyes from herself to the God who gave the promise and said, oh, you're not like anyone else. I make a promise and I sometimes break them. I say I will do something and I sometimes don't. But every time you say something, it's as good as done. That's what God is like. When God says something, it's as good as done. It's like, yeah, okay, I guarantee it's going to happen. I may not know exactly how, but it's going to happen. That's the kind of faith that Sarah had, and that's the kind of faith that we need to have. Trust God to always keep his word. Trust God to always keep his promise. If he makes a promise, he'll keep it. Even if you don't know what it's going to look like at the end of it. He's always going to keep it. That's why you can obey without certainty about the future, because you know God. You trust him. He's faithful. He's not like anybody else. So we don't trust in human beings like that, because human beings will always let us down. Every one of them, right? But not God. God is faithful. So those are the three things we need to have that kind of faith. That kind of faith that's not going to shrink back, but a kind of faith that keeps us moving forward is this kind of faith, right? It's a faith that what? Reveres God. It's a faith that builds on eternal things, and it's a faith that trusts God to be faithful. So the author then takes a moment to pause at this point. And he wants to kind of sum this up a little bit. And it's quite simple, the way he sums it up. I just want to read it. Verse 13. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. You see, even they never saw the fulfillment of the promise in this lifetime. They didn't see it. They didn't need to see it fulfilled in this lifetime, because they kept their eyes on the fulfillment of the promise. And as they kept their eyes on what God had said, they saw the better country. They saw it. And as they saw the better country, the distance between where they are now and the better country didn't matter. Didn't matter. If it took a decade, if it took 2 decades, if it took them to the end of their life, didn't matter, because they still saw the better country. And this goes back to this kind of faith that sees. The kind of faith that sees the unseen in reality. And then also sees the unseen promises that have yet to make it into reality. That's what this kind of faith does. You start to see God in the midst of your reality and believe and hold on to him and believe that he's your great high priest who is with you and is advocating for you. And as you live that life, you see the better city, the better country that is ahead. And as you keep your eyes on that, time goes on, but you still keep your eye on the better country. Time goes on. You might even die, but your eyes are on the better country, right? That's the kind of faith that we ought to have. Verse 14. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. See, so people like Abraham, when they were called out of Ur of the Chaldees, they could have gone back. I mean, it's more comfortable. I don't have to live in tents. I can have a really comfortable life. I could be, binge watching Netflix and drinking my drinks and, having a really good, comfortable life. I could have always gone back. But they didn't go back. Why? Because they kept their eyes on something else. They kept their eye on a better country. And as long as you keep your eye on a better country, then you can live in tents. You can live in tents. You can live in the lesser things of comfort and safety and all the things that we idolize in this country. You can live with less as long as you keep your eye on that better country. And that's what they say in verse 16. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. You say, do you have that longing? Do you imagine what that's going to be like every now and then? Streets of gold, presence of God, healing for all the nations, working with the angels on how to run the universe. I mean, that's pretty good, right? No more sin, no more death, no more pain, no more Satan, no more evil one. None of that. That's the better country. If we don't look at that, then we'll look at what's here. And we'll settle for lesser things and find ourselves far less satisfied. Always aching, always restless, always itching for something, never finding that purpose or meaning, always feeling like I'm on shaky foundations, I need more security in my life. All of that restlessness when we don't have our eyes on the better country. So faith sees. What are you looking at? What are you looking at? Do you see the better country? Or are you fixated on your career path? Are you fixated on making this much money? Or you're fixated on having that relationship? Or whatever it is. What is it that you're looking at? Or are you looking at a better country? Because what you see is going to guide your desires. Right? That's what it says. They were longing for a better country. That's desire, right? Once you see the better country, now you want it. And whatever it is you're looking for is where your heart will go. Wherever it is you put your attention, that's where your desires will go. And this is why sometimes our hearts seem divided. Because we're looking here, we're looking there. We're looking at God, we're looking at money, we're looking at everything. And our hearts go every which way. And what God is calling us to do is have the kind of faith that just looks at Him, that looks at the better country. And that'll direct your desires and your love in the right direction. You will love the things that matter, the things that will last. And once you love those things, then all the other comforts and safety will become less and less and less and less important. You can live in a tent and be a stranger and be an alien and not have all the full rights and all the prestige and the pats on the back, and people will say you're a bad person, all of that, all the rest, right? But that's okay. Just keep your eyes on the better country. Keep your eyes on Him. Let's pray together. Lord, we thank You that even in the moments when we do take those risks, and we do take risks of love that are big sacrifices at the time, and maybe it is to the sacrifice of comfort and safety that we do it. We thank You that as long as we keep our eyes on You and on the better country, that we're really not tempted to go back to when we had comfort. Even if we don't know where exactly we're going, we thank You that seeing You and seeing that better country is enough. Help us to keep our eyes on You and our eternal home. In Jesus, Your name, amen.